It actually gets more exciting. So you pay the landowner to get the token, and in return, you don't just make a charitable donation. You actually reserve a financial instrument in return. Mm-hmm. And it's basically a coin. And the big concept, what we're working towards, is rolling these merit tokens out as an actual currency. So that basically anything that you can do with your money today, you will be able to do with merits in the future. So you can go and buy stuff for that. You can save it, lend it, loan it. You can do everything with that.
Okay, yeah. So the token is called a merit.
Yes.
That's awesome. I love it.
It's a good name, right? It's coincidentally my name as well, but I did not come up with the idea of naming the token Merit.
Merit.
Hi.
Hi, it's great to meet you.
Great to see you here as well.
Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get started. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Merit. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SingleEarth. And at SingleEarth, what we do is we create the world's first nature-backed currency to save the world from climate crisis and biodiversity loss.
Okay, right. There's a lot we have to unpack there. So tell us what is the core value proposition of SingleEarth and what problem is it solving in the market?
Yeah, well, at the core of what we do is always finding ways how to pay landowners for keeping nature intact. So that was the first problem that we started solving at the very beginning, so about 3 years ago. And it started actually from a very local problem. So in my home country here in Estonia, we have a lot of old, beautiful forests. Half of Estonia is actually covered with forests. Right. But in the recent years, we've seen a lot of intensive forestry and a lot of forest clear cuts. So our beautiful old forests are cut down. And that kind of started the company for us, in a sense that we started finding ways how can we make it stop? How can we find ways so that landowners would not want to cut down their forests? And what is actually driving this nature destruction? And we understood that what is always driving this is the business models, the underlying business models that today only incentivize monetizing nature as raw material. So that means that landowners today can only earn money if they, for example, cut down the forest and sell it as timber. Right. So if we only pay the landowners for cutting down forests, well, this is what we will get. But in terms of climate change and biodiversity loss and halting these big problems, we need to figure out how to start protecting nature, because this is the one system that helps to mitigate all these problems. And how do we do that? Well, we understood that we have to start paying landowners for keeping their forests growing. Mm-hmm. And obviously, we all understand that there is more to nature than just raw material. We all enjoy being in nature. We all understand that we have to have nature around us. We love having nature around us. But it's actually also scientifically quantifiable. Why do we need to have nature around us? And these things are called the ecosystem services. So nature provides us with a lot of ecosystem services that actually make this planet habitable for us. So, for example, providing us with the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink. All of this comes from the fact that we have nature that provides us with all of that. But we have never paid for these ecosystem services. And instead, we are paying for destroying these ecosystem services. Right. So we understood that if we are able to quantify these good things and put them or create them products out of them, then maybe we can start putting value on them. And obviously we started from, okay, how much of this good value does nature have on this planet? And to our great surprise, we understood that there is no place where you can go and see, for example, how much a particular forest removes carbon from the atmosphere. We all know that they do that, but if you want to see how much of that, well, there is no place to find that out. So we started from solving that problem first. So we started building a digital twin of the world's nature, meaning that we basically take everything that nature does in the physical world and bring that to the digital world. So we started building this global carbon, biodiversity, and other ecosystem services to show what nature is doing in real time. And we use satellite data and big data analysis to basically create these big models. And why we need these models is because this digital twin for us becomes the oracle for minting tokens for us. So in the very simple way, how we create tokens is that every time 100 kilograms of CO2, for example, is removed from the atmosphere by a forest, we emit one token to the landowner, and the landowner can sell it to individuals or businesses, and through that earn money. And the landowner continues to receive the tokens for as long as they keep their natural resources intact.
Okay. Okay, I want to make sure that I understand this because I think it's really interesting what you're saying. So before we do that, please unpack what a digital twin is for us.
Yeah, a digital twin is basically representing what nature is doing in the physical world and just represents that in the digital world. So it's just like mimicking the work that nature does in the physical world and brings that to the digital world. How we do that is we use satellite data, so we monitor the world's nature. But unfortunately, there is no way for us to measure, like, for example, carbon sequestration from the satellites.
Yeah.
So we can check nature from the satellites, but we have to have like the scientific models built on top of that to kind of describe how nature works in real time. So we have these real-time models that show us what nature at this point of time is doing. And this is kind of the basis for us for minting the tokens because we tokenize the work that nature does.
Okay, right. So then your minting process is directly associated with what?
With what nature is doing. So for example, right now forests around the world are removing carbon from the atmosphere because they grow and they store it within themselves, and this is how nature grows basically. And this is also what we want to do to mitigate climate change. And every time we see that 100 kilograms has been sequestered in a forest, we emit 1 token to the landowner. Right. So basically, if you think of any cryptocurrency or coins in the world, well, they are always minted based on some mathematical algorithms.
Yeah.
Our tokens are also minted based on mathematical algorithms, but the ones that actually occur in nature. So we take the mathematical algorithms from nature and use that to mint tokens.
Wow, okay, so then the idea is that you're presenting the landowners with an option to say you can sell it, you can cut down your trees, get so much money in terms of timber, or you could actually choose to preserve your trees, plant even more, because then the more you do, then it's the minting process, and then you get a token. Exactly.
And the longer you stay with us, the richer you become.
Okay, so please explain to me how, let's assume I have a token. How is that token gaining value?
So the token gains value when you sell it, obviously. So you, as a landowner, would want to sell your token because then you receive fiat money, so like euros or dollars in return.
Right.
So the buyers, on the other hand, can be either businesses or individuals. So for the businesses, we already know that there are use cases where companies want to contribute back to nature or to climate goals or biodiversity goals. So these all are possible with the tokens as well. So companies can just come in, buy the tokens. We call it burning the tokens, which is basically like making them not tradable anymore, and they can just claim their contribution. And that's that. That's kind of the easiest way. You just burn the tokens and you have made a contribution to nature because you have financed nature protection to a landowner.
Right.
Now, as an individual, it actually gets more exciting. So you pay the landowner to get the token, and in return, you don't just make a charitable donation. You actually reserve a financial instrument in return, and it's basically a coin. And the big concept, what we're working towards, is rolling these merit tokens out as an actual currency, so that like basically anything that you can do with your money today, you will be able to do with merits in the future. So you can go and buy stuff for that. You can save it, lend it, loan it. You can do everything with that.
Okay. Yeah. So the token is called a merit.
Yes.
That's awesome. I love
it's a good name, right? It's coincidentally my name as well, but I did not come up with the idea of naming the token Merit.
And that's the token that the landowner receives.
Yes.
And then you introduced it. You said that as an individual, I can go and buy the token from the landowner, basically just giving them money. But then I receive a coin, and that's different from the token.
It's the same token, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, the same token, and that becomes a financial instrument.
Exactly.
Just like Bitcoin, Ether, any other.
Yep, but better because it's actually saving the world. And the coolest part of the Merit token, like the system, is that the amount of tokens in circulation is always limited to how much nature can sustain. Which means that by that, we're also able to limit the economy with how much nature can sustain. And this is how we create this truly sustainable nature-based economy.
And presumably then the amount of tokens in circulation, well, I guess your purpose would be not to cap it. You'd say, well, let's grow this infinitely, because the more we grow it, that means that the more nature is expanding and growing,
Yes.
etc.
Yeah, but it still is limited to this planet. Like there is actually, although it seems like we have like infinite amount of nature, we actually have a very limited amount of it. And this is how like the amount of money in circulation should actually also be limited to that. Because I think this year it was like 25th or 26th of July when we had this World Overshoot Day, when the world had used up more natural resources, or the entire year's worth of natural resources in the middle of the year. So this is basically what we want to avoid, so that you can't consume more than nature has to offer.
Right, so you started how long ago?
3 years,
So
basically.
3 years ago, you just woke up one day and thought, I have a vision. How did this came about?
I wish it was as simple as that.
Right.
We actually started from a very simple way. Like we have companies, why don't we connect them, and they just start, financing nature conservation. At the very beginning, we actually knew that we want to implement the blockchain for that, because this allows us to create this very traceable and transparent way of accounting for these ecosystem services that nature is doing. But at the very beginning, we didn't have the money concept actually there. It was, I think, like a year or two later when we understood that there's actually more solutions that we can kind of connect into the ecosystem to make it scale even broader. So basically taking this to the masses in terms of like enabling all consumers to tap into the system. Because like if you just talk to companies, then it's still a very limited circle that is kind of financing nature protection. And we also understood that there are so many people who actually want to do something about climate change and biodiversity loss, but they don't have any tools. So kind of like offering them a way to integrate nature protection into every transaction that they make by just switching the underlying money that they use. It's kind of a very easy way for everybody to start contributing to these goals.
Okay, then what I still don't quite get is once the individual has bought the token from the landowner, that token is now a financial instrument. What determines the parity that financial instrument has with fiat money?
That depends on basically, it's going to be eventually an open market price. So the market is going to decide that. But the good thing is that as we also have a business case for businesses who are buying these tokens and burning them to make an ESG contribution or to contribute to the climate or biodiversity goals, then it always has this real life utility value as well.
Right.
So it is kind of like on the market, free on the market value, but it's always connected to a real life value as well. So in this sense, it's not a purely speculative crypto currency that depends only on like what people assume the value should be, but it always is connected to the real life value as well. And as we want this to actually function as a payment currency, it can't be that volatile. It has to be more or less stable. Yeah. And this is why we have this utility value in the world, a real world as well.
Okay, so I'm glad you introduced it, because the next question I have for you is, what needs to happen between now and a Merit becoming a payment mechanism?
That's a good question. What needs to happen is basically businesses need to start accepting cryptocurrencies as a payment method, which is not the case today, unfortunately. But then again, if we look at the amount of and the volume of investments that has been made into developing the crypto space and specifically the payment solutions, then I'm pretty sure that within the next couple of years, crypto payments will become mainstream, because this is basically inevitable. Like we know that this will happen, and once that happens, we have the perfect currency to introduce to this ecosystem, because it also creates a sustainable new financial system that everybody hopefully will want to join if we want to keep this planet habitable.
Now I understand that you can sign up. Join a waiting list.
Yes.
For when the minting process starts producing the tokens.
We actually have minted the first tokens already. Okay. We have the first tokens that we minted from a few lands in Europe and Brazil. So rainforest and then some forests here in Europe. So we have the first bunch of tokens. We are gradually rolling this out to individuals and businesses. So it's actually already in the process. And I think that's a cool place to be, where we have validated that yes, we can create money based on the work that nature does. So that's actually now fact.
All right, Merit. So this is extremely visionary, which is amazing. But of course, that comes with challenges, right? Yeah. If I was a landowner and you come and tell me, stop, I will give you a token in return, I'd be skeptical. what are the main challenges that you're facing in introducing this new concept and this vision into the market, and how are you overcoming them?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of challenges. So the first one is basically the one that you just mentioned, like the token-based solutions are not mainstream yet for the landowners, and the same for consumers. Like regular people are not using tokens for making transactions,
right.
And that is why, like every time we design a product or service, we actually keep that in mind. So we always think of like, how can a person without any crypto experience use the system? So for example, to make it very easy for landowners to do that, we actually have built the basically the Merit to fiat exchange on our platform, so that the landowner can easily earn the fiat money without going to external crypto exchanges. So they can do the simple transactions on our own platform, and we have kind of made this very easy for them. And the same goes for consumers who can just come to our platform, purchase the tokens with fiat money without going to any external exchanges at first at all. Eventually they can do that if they want to, but that's never a requirement. So by building the system, we're also making it easier for everybody to start using these crypto tokens in their daily lives. In addition to that, like obviously, one part of the big challenges that we're facing is the thing that we are working in very fastly developing space, which is the crypto space. It's developing super fast. So basically, we have like new solutions, like Web3 solutions coming up, I think, on a daily basis, more or less. So we're constantly looking into that and seeing what other things that we could also include into our system. And obviously, the regulatory side is also developing. So we're actually a licensed company. We have the virtual asset service provider license here in Estonia, which I think eventually will become like an EU-wide license. So we're kind of always working on this compliance as well. And I think the third part of what is like really challenging is that I think everybody has by today become used to thinking in terms of carbon and climate change, but very few are still able to understand the biodiversity loss and the other challenges that we're also facing. But we are introducing all of that together. So we have carbon, but we also have biodiversity and other ecosystem services as well. Actually, our science team, we have an in-house science team, and they have come up with a novel solution on how to actually value holistically nature for everything that it does and represent that in one single token. So it's actually also like creating scientific work to make this happen. So there's a lot of new things that we always have to come up with to make this system work.
Right, and I want to get back to that in just a minute. But before that, help me understand, how does your business model work?
Oh yeah, so we take a transaction fee from the transactions that have been made with Merit tokens. So this is basically how it works. And that's really important because if you think of the existing carbon models and business models like that, then they always require upfront payments from the landowners, whereas with us, they don't actually have to pay anything. So for them, it's basically free of charge, so they can come on board. We make the assessment on their land, the carbon sequestration and all these assessments, and they have everything for free. They won't pay to us like anything until they have sold the first tokens.
Right.
And that's making it very easy for landowners to actually come on board. They don't have basically any barriers. They can always just come in, and once they start earning anything, then they start paying us, basically, or we take the cut from the transactions.
So if I understand this correctly, you're creating a new market for tokens, and at the same time, you're creating the exchange for that market, and that's where you basically get.
Exactly, yeah.
Clever.
Thanks.
Okay, so you touched a little bit on the fact that you could expand the use to this, and I when I was reading through your website, I thought, well, if this works for nature, as you say, it works for wildlife, it works for social situations, it essentially works for anything that any significant group of people places value on.
Exactly.
Right. So on that assumption, let's fast forward 15, 20 years. Would you see the market segmenting a lot based on people's values and interests?
Yeah, I totally think that that's the case. And I think we can actually already see that happening. So if you think of, for example, games where people assign value to things that are like don't have real value in the real world. So we already have this segmentation, or like these new economies happening. And I think we will see a lot of like these parallel economies happening in the future. But I also think that there are some underlying values that we all kind of understand and appreciate, so that there's still opportunities to have this global market, the global economy as well. And I really hope that like the ecosystem and the planet's health is something that kind of unites the entire humankind towards like this one value, and this nature-based or nature-backed economy might be the one global thing in the future.
Right, and so at the moment we have a global economy where the common denominator is money, right? And that's what everyone values. So when we introduce a proxy to value like tokens, and I think there was a very good case about Hearts, a token in Israel that a group of mothers started generating, and the rewarded activities like taking care of the kids, or doing like the school pool, or teaching piano lessons, that sort of thing, which really got me thinking about this. Do you see anything to be concerned about if we think about the segregation of different economies based on value tokens versus what we've had today, which is basically everyone values money?
Yeah, I think like the interoperability of these economies is probably one of the questions, like how many hearts does equal like carbon, I don't know, a ton of carbon, for example. Can you actually switch between these economies? And are we creating like these very isolated communities with that? Right now, we don't have like any borders, but if we create this type of communities, maybe they will become more and more isolated. I think these are the challenges. But I still think that there are some common values that still unite the entire humankind. So it's not going to be like separate economies all over the world. Right. I hope.
Okay, tell me now a little bit about what your customers say about SingleEarth. I'm assuming that you're a two-sided platform. So what do the landowners, the ones that have recently received their first minted merits, say about SingleEarth?
They are obviously very excited because for years, for decades, forever, there's been like a gap on the market where they could earn money from just like keeping nature intact. Like there have been like new business models for planting trees and creating new forests and all that. But if you already have a mature forest that is already there, then like nobody's paying to keep it there. You either cut it down for timber, or you cut it down and replant a new forest there, because that sequesters a lot of carbon and kind of seems like a good thing, which it's actually not. So if you have an old growth forest, which is very biodiverse, and we actually want this to stay on this planet, then nobody's actually willing to pay for that, or wasn't, until we came and we made this very easy for them. And the second part that they really like is the fact that there's like no barriers on entering that. So we have made it very easy for them. They just come to our platform, they find their land lot, we give them all the ecological value that we know about this land, and they basically validate that this is, or verify that this is their land, and that's it, they're on board. They don't have to go through any manual procedures, they don't have to pay anything, so it's very easy for them to get on board.
Right, okay. Last question. What's your vision for SingleEarth, and what role do you think it will play in the overall financial services ecosystem in the next 5 years?
Well, in the next 5 years, I really hope that the crypto payment solutions have actually become mainstream. If that's the case, then this will be a huge breakthrough for us as well, because we can basically plug our currency into every transaction. And in 5 years, it's going to be like 2027. So we will be just 3 years away from the big first climate and biodiversity goals of 2030, which means that we better be using nature-based or nature-backed currencies by the time, or I think we will be in big trouble. So I'm pretty sure that our nature-backed currency has the potential to actually reshape the economy, and not just from the economic perspective, but also from the planet's health, from the environmental perspective.
Right. Well, Merit, we speak to a lot of fintechs on a regular basis, and I can honestly say that this is one of the most interesting bits of innovation we've heard. So thank you so much for coming and sharing it with us.
Thank you so much for having me.